Hello, my name is Nancy Strickland, and in the next 7 minutes I'm going to show you how to work with manipulation in your Windows Phone 7 Silverlight applications. Manipulation means letting the user move or scale UI objects on the screen by dragging or stretching the object with their fingers. You process the user's touch events using an API that captures those events and can redraw the UI object. In Windows Phone 7, you can manipulate any object that's derived from the UI element class. There are 3 events you can program for when using manipulations. Obviously, manipulation started and manipulation completed are fired when the user starts or stops moving the object with their finger. The manipulation delta event fires when the touch changes position on the screen, so it fires multiple times while the user is dragging or stretching. As of this release, these are the only events that the framework offers. Inertia events, for example, aren't supported. A transform is a class that you can use to change the size or position of a user interface object. It maps points from one size or one position to another. Windows Phone 7 supports scale transform, which lets you stretch or shrink an object using scale X and scale Y properties. And translate transform lets you move an object using X and Y properties. If you're familiar with transformations in Silverlight, you'll see that this is pretty much the same, except that Windows Phone 7 doesn't support rotate transforms or skew transforms, at least in this release. An instance of a class that's derived from UI element has a property named render transform. If you create an instance of a transform and assign it to the render transform property, then it'll transform the object when you change the properties of the transform, like X or scale X or Y or scale Y. You can apply multiple transforms by using the transform group class. You add the transforms to the children collection of the transform group, and then you assign the group to the render transform property. Now let's see a demo. Visual Studio 2010 uses an emulator for testing and debugging your Windows Phone 7 application. But that emulator doesn't support multi-touch input through the mouse, so you'll have to test either on a computer that supports touch input or on an actual phone device. I'll open a new project using the Silverlight phone template that you can get by following the installation instructions in the Getting Started video that's part of this series. I'll drag a rectangle onto the page and change the fill color to blue in the Properties window. Now I'm going to expand the XAML file in Solution Explorer and open the C# code page. I'm going to declare 3 variables: a translate transform, a scale transform, and a transform group. Then in the constructor, I'll instantiate all 3 of those. And now I'll add the scale transform and the translate transform to the children collection of the transform group. And I'll assign the transform group to the render transform property of the rectangle. Now I need an event listener for each of the 3 manipulation events: manipulation started, manipulation completed, and manipulation delta. I'll type in the name of each one and then type += and tab twice, so it'll create the delegate and the skeleton handler for me. And now I'll write code for each of those events. First, the started and the completed events. In the start event handler, I'll change the color of the rectangle to red, which is the second number, the 255, in this RGB. The first number controls transparency, so I'm making that 127, about half of 255, so that it'll be half transparent. In other words, when the user touches the screen and fires this manipulation started event, the rectangle will change from blue to a half transparent red. Then in the completed event, I'll change that first value to 255, so the red color will turn solid when the user lifts their finger and fires the manipulation completed event. And now I'll paste code into the manipulation delta event handler. This code applies the delta manipulation to the translate transform of the rectangle to move it as the user moves the touch input. In other words, the event args variable e knows how much the touch moved on the x and y scale. That's the delta manipulation. To move the rectangle, we'll just add the delta manipulation values to each of the current values of the axes. And for the scaling, I'll use the delta value as a multiplier to change the scale of the rectangle. I'm just checking first in case the manipulation was a move and not a scaling, in which case the scale delta would be 0 and the square would disappear. Now I'll run it. First I'll move the square. You see how touching it gave me the transparent red, and releasing the touch turned it to solid red. And now I'm going to resize it. I'll click in one corner with my mouse, and the rectangle turns semi-transparent red when I do that. And then I'll take my finger. Now I know you can't see this, but I'm describing what I'm doing. I'm touching the lower right corner, and moving my finger back and forth. And there it's getting larger and smaller as I drag my finger back and forth. And when I let go, it turns bright solid red. This was a very simple example. To get more detailed information, here's the MSDN documentation, and it also has links to some sample code. And there you have a quick look at using manipulation events in your Phone 7 apps. I'll put a copy of the code up on my blog for download, and as I post new videos in this series, I'm announcing them on Twitter. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.